Hello, everybody. I understand that there is a test tomorrow. Heinrich again has asked me to lead you all in a quick review. Now, my throat's not doing very well today, so you'll have to pardon me if I sound like I'm dying. Anyway, let us begin.
Okay, first we are going to discuss the landforms of Europe. First of all, you'll see the Pyrenees Mountains, which separate Spain and France. Then above Italy, you're going to see the Alps. Then over north of Greece, you'll see the Carpathian Mountains. And then all the way in Russia, you will see the Ural Mountains. In this next image, you're going to see some landforms, such as the Iberian Peninsula, which is where Spain is, the British Isles, Scandinavia, which is made up of a lot of peninsulas, the Italian Peninsula, which looks like a boot, and the Balkan Peninsula, which is famous for Greece. Also, in the northern part of the mainland of Europe, you'll see the North European Plain, and that's where they do a lot of their farming, and that's going to be something that helped shape how fertile and fruitful the Middle Ages are for these kings. And finally, we're going to look at the bodies of water. Here you'll see the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the west. Then between the British Isles and the mainland Europe, you'll see the English Channel. And right above that's the North Sea. If you go a little bit to the east in Scandinavia, you'll find the Baltic Sea. If you go all the way down to where Asia Minor is, you're going to find the Black Sea. And that big body of water in the bottom is the Mediterranean. Now, another thing we need to talk about is the North Atlantic Drift. That is that body of water where it's more of a current, and it brings in warm water all the way from the equator. And that's why Europe is so warm and why it's not frozen all the time.
Now that the geography's out of the way, let us talk a little bit about the history of things. Let's talk about, hierarchies, the church, and kings. Yes, the kings, yes. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the Catholic Church. I know a lot of you are not Catholic. That's not what this is. I'm just having to explain the basic functions of the church and mainly the hierarchy of it. Because if you don't understand that kind of stuff, you won't understand studying the Middle Ages. Because, when you remove religion from a culture, how do you study the culture? That's a major part of it. Okay, so, what's it? Okay, so, first of all, in the Catholic Church, it's not a Protestant denomination, so it has a weird different set of history and stuff. But at the top of their church, they have a man called the Pope. Now, I understand it's called the Bishop of Rome, really, but we all call him the Pope. Under him is something called a bishop. Yes, the bishop. And then under the bishop, you have the priest, and then a deacon, and then everybody else. Okay, so everybody else is not an ordained minister at all in the Catholic Church. Everybody above that, though, is an ordained minister. But the deacon's supposed to be like a representative of the other people or something. I don't know. There's a lot of confusion for me. It really is. But now that said, that's really all we need to know about that aspect of it. But what you also need to know, though, the bishop is in charge of a diocese. What is a diocese? Think of a state. The state of, Texas. That's a big state. But it's really big, right? So they divide it up into little areas called parishes. Parishes are like where the church, individual church is, the building, and where a priest is. But they all have someone over them. And Texas is really big, so there's like a few of these in there. But there's one man that's in charge of a handful of priests, and that is the bishop. And the bishop resides in a cathedral. Yes, the cathedral. Not a basilica, a cathedral. That was a different term when we studied the Byzantine Empire. Gets really confusing, doesn't it? Now, that said, that's really all we need to study on that, other than the fact that Christianity, especially what we call Catholicism today, was a huge part of the Middle Ages. I almost forgot, there's a major aspect of something we need to talk about. That's monasteries. Monasteries become like centers of education for everybody. Monks come in, they kind of sequester themselves away, but some of them go out and they help the community. And by helping the community, they're actually spreading education. They're teaching people to read and write, even though, well, that stays pretty low for a very long time, but we can thank the printing press, but we'll talk about that later. And then, the big important thing is, they copied manuscripts. After the fall of Rome, a lot of works were going to disappear. But these monks, even if it wasn't a Christian work, they said, we need to maintain that history. So they copied dozens and dozens, and maybe I can just say hundreds, of copies of these books. This is why we still have Plato and Aristotle today, for example. So we can, what's that phrase? How the Irish saved the world, or saved history, or something like that. So that's a major thing to remember. So, after the fall of Rome, there was this huge power vacuum. And, well, the church decided, you know what, we need to step in to try to help people out. It's kind of crazy, and we don't know what in the world's going to result in the long term. But one thing that had happened was that in the eastern part of the empire, or the Roman Empire, because it still existed in the east, we call it the Byzantine, but they were still the Romans. Well, the emperor over there felt that it was his job to declare if someone could be a bishop. Well, who we call the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, he wasn't in part of that empire anymore, and he saw no reason why he should have to, fall under that. So they came up with an idea. All these small kingdoms had started building up, but one specific kingdom started taking over all of it. And that was the Frankish Empire, led by a man named as Charlemagne, who is also known as Charles the Great. Well, he was very Christian, and the Pope, well, he said, you know what? We're going to coronate you as a king. And so, Pope Leo III coronated not Constantine, wrong part of the empire, Charlemagne as the new king of the Frankish Empire, which would later become part of, or become known as, really, the Holy Roman Empire. He even called Charlemagne the King of the Romans. That's kind of a slap in the face to the actual Roman emperor, isn't it? Well, that is going to eventually lead to a big dispute later on in something we call the Great Schism. But that's not part of this test. Like that? Nah. There we go. Charlemagne, though, he's going to be a very well-loved king. He takes over a lot of Central Europe and Northern Europe, and he introduces something called feudalism. And feudalism, that is going to become the norm for most of all of Europe, even England, even though England kind of has a slightly alternate version of it or something. I don't know. Anyway, he's going to do that, and he is going to become that influential. Now, I just used a big term. It's called feudalism. That's a big, big word, but feudalism. Oh, well. Anyway, what are we going to do in feudalism? Well, first of all, there is a hierarchy in it. It starts with a king at the top, way up there. Then under him are the nobles, and under him, or them really, are the knights, or sometimes called lesser nobles. And then there are the peasants, or the serfs, which is where we get the word servant from today. Now, this is a basic structure. It can get really complicated, but that's just a basic structure, of course. Now, how did this work? Well, the king provided stuff for everyone below him, and everyone in the lower tiers provided things for everyone in the upper tiers. They all had their roles to play, and because of that, it worked. Now, it can only work if everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you don't have a lot of corruption, but, well, people are people, right? Well, that's the basics of it. What's going to eventually happen, though? The serfs are vassals to the knights are vassals to the nobles, and the nobles are vassals to the king, and the king would say he was a vassal to God. Again, Christianity plays that big of a role. Now, that is part of the system. The king would give his land, he would divide it up amongst his nobles into areas called fiefs. Yes, fief. Not thief, fief with an F. Then the fief would be then divided into something called manors. Manors, the noble would have his own manor, of course, but all the knights under him would have those as well. And these are these areas of lands that they took over. And then in those would be all the serfs who lived, and they would have these little manor houses, and they'd set up a whole area where they farmed and they lived. And these little areas actually eventually became the towns and cities of Europe. In fact, you can go to many of the towns in Europe, even the big cities, and you can find the middle-aged areas, and they still look very much like that. It's very confusing sometimes. But in the end, if there's anything I need you to remember, Feudalism equals government. Manorialism equals economy. Remember that, and you will do very well, I think. Right? You think so too? Yes, very good. Anyways, guys, study, get some sleep, don't overthink, but make sure you do study, and have a great night. Toodles!